I've received a surprising amount of requests to make a PvP guide for using shields, so I've decided to go through with it, outlining the basic philosophy behind shields in Dark Souls 3. For what it's worth, I think shields are pretty balanced in Dark Souls 3 when it comes to PvP, and it's one of those things that Dark Souls 3 does right. I guess now you're all wondering what's so special about it. Well, the problem is, in Dark Souls 3 when it comes to PvP, or in all Souls games actually, due to how rolls work, playing passive makes you super strong, and having a shield on top of that doesn't help. Now, previous games had a notably worse balance when it comes to that, since in Dark Souls 2, for example, you could just block whatever you want and still have stamina to boot. However, in Dark Souls 3, it's not that simple. Those of you who watched my previous video on how to deal with shields in PvP should have a basic idea on how shields work. The truth is, in Dark Souls 3, you can't really block all that much, especially if your opponent using special items like Night Slayering, so you have to play around that. Before we get into much detail, I think it's the right moment to mention Magic Shield and Great Magic Shield. Those two allow you to pretty much block whatever you want at practically no cost, making openings like Rapier Shield poke a lot more safe. And well, there is a reason a lot of people hate those two spells. While you can still stall it in competitive environment, an average arena user will surely find it boring and cancer. Anyways, the basic premise of using shield in Dark Souls 3 is knowing when to roll and when to block. The easiest way to do that is to just see how much stamina damage you take while blocking and compare it to 1 or even 2 rolls. It becomes pretty obvious that in 90% of the cases it is better to roll, since rolls are very cheap in Dark Souls 3. So when do you block then? Well, unless you're using a magic shield or some big ass great shield with a ton of stability, you should only block in a very few specific cases. First one is probably the most important. Blocking to cover up your rolls. I still see plenty of people to this day roll sideways against fast weapons with good tracking like straight swords. Doing so will get you absolutely wrecked. However, this isn't always intentional, and sometimes there's just not enough space to roll backwards twice. In those instances, you can block. So if you know you're gonna get caught mid-roll, you can just block the hit and get out safely. Obviously, you still have to manage your stamina, and if you don't have enough stamina to block 2 hits, you'd better just take the damage. However, assuming that you have enough stamina, blocking on wake up to cover bad rolls is a good way to minimize the risk during this engagement. The next best thing you can use shield for is blocking all the annoying pressure shit, like throwing knives, avalanche no-scopes, Farron darts, fire surge, and even stuff like lightning arrow if you have the right shield. It's super important, since stuff like throwing knives and avalanche no-scopes are as safe as it gets when you want to apply the pressure. And having a shield nullifies that, ensuring that you can't be pressured, pushing the matchup in your favor. In addition to all of that, there are certain matchups that allow you to use shield however you want. Most of them are in your favor due to the fact that you take very little stamina damage when blocking against those weapons. So for example, you can block plenty of Esto hits without wasting much stamina. In addition to that, shield can save you in certain other matchups, like for example against katanas. Assuming that people like to mindlessly spam the dashing attack, blocking it ensures safe reset to neutral, allowing you to reapply the pressure. With all that being said, you can still try to block everything and walk up with the shield trying to apply the pressure. However, if you meet someone who has watched my backstab tutorial, they just straight backstab you. And if you face a person that has watched my how to counter shields video, they will likely put a Night Slayering on and break your guard in a couple of combos. At the end of the day, it's up to you what shield you want to use, and depending on the stability you get to work with, you can decide if it's worth blocking or not. What I have described for you in the past few minutes is just the safest way to use shields and get away with it. Shields in Dark Souls 3 won't solve all of your problems, but if you know how to use them without trying to abuse them, they can serve you well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.